Alright, so good evening everybody. I've been wondering how to do this video for a while because, frankly, uh, there's not a lot to talk about, while at the same time there is quite a bit to talk about. When discussing tabletop RPGs, and especially when talking about different alternatives to what is considered the mainstream system, such as the current edition of Dungeons and Dragons, which at the time of this video is 5th edition, and I believe Call of Cthulhu is at its 7th edition. The frustration, not only from the mechanics but also the politics of the companies involved, cannot be ignored when discussing any kind of alternatives. However, it is also a disservice to the games that people will push and champion as the alternatives. It does a great disservice if the only reason you're playing them is to be uh, counter countercultural to the what would be considered the quote uh, TTRPG community, end quote. Namely, the politics of companies like Chaosium and Wizards of the Coast currently. Um, while the frustrations with those companies and their politics is understandable, however, I'm not interested in playing a game simply because it is an alternative to the um, to the politics of the companies in question, but because I think the systems should stand on their own merits and by themselves. And so this is the system that I play, that I enjoy the best, more than 5e, more than any edition, because it is so streamlined and simplistic and easy to teach people. And like, the math involved is not it's not a very number crunchy kind of game. So the math involved is very quick and straightforward. So instead of talking about politics, instead of talking about worldviews and philosophies, I'm going to talk about basic fantasy RPG and the merits that it has earned. So, um, where do you begin? Well, I believe first and foremost we must talk about the man behind the magic, Chris Gonnerman. Chris Gonnerman has a YouTube channel. He has quite the presence on social media altogether, and even on the website there is a forum where he is actually quite active. Um, in any and all cases, when it comes to his social media handles, he usually goes by Solomoriah, um, and he usually uses this as his avatar. His Solomoriah Speaks videos on YouTube are quite excellent, and not only um, for helping out newer players, but to give experienced players some tips and tricks on how to run their games, maybe better. Again, it depends on your play style, and he will even tell you that. The man behind the screen, the what we would call the wizard in charge of this magical little game, is a very soft-spoken man. He's not very opinionated. Um, keeps his private life to himself. Those who have ever watched my channel know I am quite opinionated and will not shy away from letting my views known, even though I have done that in the past. But for the sake of this video, and to give Chris Gonnerman and Basic Fantasy RPG its due, my politics will stay out of it. And so we'll talk about the games simply on their own merits. Because, quite simply put, they have earned that respect. So, if one is to try to get into playing Basic Fantasy RPG, where do you start? Well, the 3 books I have before me are really, truthfully, you can just get started with this, because I run a homebrew campaign, but I also run a second campaign that features around this module, and then you have some extra little adventures here that you can use for one shots or to add to this or to add to your world or whatever you want. And there's many other books. So, basic fantasy by itself, just the core rules. You get everything you need to build a character. Tells you everything you need. Even gives you this neat, handy little outline of what it looks like. What your character sheet will be similar to, and then you get your races and your classes and the prerequisites and restrictions that you need and thief skills. And I'm trying to be very brief. You got your equipment and what they cost and how much they weigh. You got land travel vehicles and sea travel vehicles. Here's your spells. The first 2 pages are divided by cleric and magic user, and then eventually, like, they're just in alphabetical order as an index. Continuing on, you get, and this is a pretty good chunk of spells right here, by the way. You can see it took me a while to get through it. You have everything from mapping to finding secret doors and dungeon survival and lighting, dungeon adventure, retainers, which is a mechanic that has fallen out of favor with more modern RPGs, but actually comes in handy, especially if your players are having a lot of trouble with particular encounters and dungeons and stuff. Rules on how to fight and missiles and grenades and stuff like that. You have your attack bonus tables up here, and you turning the undead for clerics and morale checks and stuff like that, and how healing and rest works, and here's your saving throws. And this is why I say this book is really all you need to get started on a game, is because you can literally just go ahead. You have a bestiary in here, and it's a very good chunk. Where's the first page? I think this is the first page. Okay, so we're on page 56, right? So that is 71 pages of monsters. Like, might not be the biggest bestiary you ever seen, but it's certainly not small either. Gives you plenty of options. Things about treasure generation, you know, how to come up with magic items, and what. Here's the monster tables for what treasures they have, and stuff like that. And, I mean, just manifold stuff, and like, random encounters, and like even in cities, and like creating an NPC party, you know, uh, uh, dungeon dressing and stuff like that. It really is all you need. The game is very easy to run. It was the first game I ever DM'd for, and it's been very fun. As previously stated, this is just little extra adventures, just kind of all pulled together from different authors, and they have their own maps and counter tables and stuff like that. They cover a variety of levels for play, so um, you have that, and then of course probably what is considered the best starting module. I got this from Thrift Books online, but what is considered the best module for starting out new characters if you decide you want to run a module, not homebrew or anything like that, and that's Morgansfort. Now, there's a thing about this particular edition, and I'll get into it here in a little while, but this is a little bit of an older edition, and we'll talk about that here in a minute, because I do believe it is important to a degree. Uh, Again, leaving out the politics, just as an aside to mention it, but that comes with 3 dungeons and a settlement with NPCs that have names, and like even the guards will have names. There's a dungeon right there. got rumor tables. Like, this is basically inspired by the Keep on the Borderlands. And, you got descriptions of different rooms. What you'll be reading to your players if you decide you want to just straight up read out of the book. The blocked text there is what you're going to be reading to your players. As you can see, you got hit point check boxes and all that. And it's a really good module. My players haven't played through the whole thing yet. We're still going through it. In the Morgansfort campaign. So, I mentioned that this was a different edition. This was a bit of an older edition. What do I mean by that? Okay, so this took a little bit of research. Right, so the newer edition that you get that has the more colored in artwork on the front, which kind of reminds me of like the colored cover edition of Eye of the World, the first book in the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan. So I kind of do like the newer editions cover better, but yeah, I do like this too, because I think it looks really nice and actually stands in contrast with the more darker colors of the other books. But anyway, continuing on, what's the basic difference between editions? Because editions is probably not the right word, but that's what they use. It's more like revisions. So is there like this is like to clarify rules and stuff like that. No big deal. This had a few very small changes into it that was interesting. And the only reason I bring it up is because while I think it's a little bit, you know, silly to be upset about it, the point being, Chris Gonnerman, because he wants his game to remain apolitical, has always tried to strive that it's welcome to anybody who wants to pick it up and play it. That it's not, and he only changed it not because of pressure, but because he felt like they were mistakes on his part. So I'm going to turn to the sections in question because they're in the back with cover the unknown. So, by the way, spoilers to a degree since I'm literally showing you the pages. So, in this edition, you can see Surreal, which is the serving maid, is described as a dark-skinned, almond-eyed girl from the southern tribes. Now, seems very innocuous on the surface, it certainly does to me. It doesn't imply any kind of racial thing whatsoever to me. And then, Gwalan, I'm sorry, an attractive medium-skinned woman. So, like, they're described, I guess, so that the players can differentiate between the two upon entering the dungeon. Uh, but these descriptions in the newer editions are taken out because there is a blogger on that, and I'm not going to link the review, that really called attention to this. And by what Mr. Gonnerman has said, that he simply wrote notes as he played through, because he would write notes as he played these campaigns with his players. And so this was one of the notes. I guess maybe one of his players asked what she looked like or something like that, and he described her, and that's just what he wrote down. That's what ended up in the module. That's out of the newer edition. And the only reason he did it is because these two are the only time that anybody's described with skin color. Nobody else is described in this manner. And so he felt like, in trying to avoid calling attention to it, it did the opposite. And so he took them out. Again, not because of pressure, but simply because he felt that he unintentionally called attention to it when that wasn't his intent. And so they're gone now. Those descriptions are in the newer editions. So if that's something that if this is something that does bother you, then the newer edition is what you want. Available in PDF form. I don't know if there's a hard copy of the newer edition or not. I'm pretty sure there is. Another thing that is different is something that involves the pregnant orc women. This down here, this description has a few more things added to it because the blogger that reviewed this, like, really read a whole lot into it, in my opinion, a little bit more than what was necessary. But Chris has gone on to describe a little bit more to clarify that killing the pregnant orc women, is not necessarily the answer to this situation. So, because this is a game that relies on a lot of reaction rolls and player creativity, it's not like 5e where you just roll a die and you succeed or fail based on that roll out. You have to be, as a player in this world, you have to be creative. So again, I think it's innocuous, but if that's something that bothers you, then the newer edition will be the one for you. Um, and I'm not going to spoil the end because there's some ending to um, the whole Cave of the Unknown level that, let's just say it's a little different now in the newer edition, because I don't want to spoil that. So, those are just things to consider. Even if you end up with this edition, like, I'm fine with this edition. I don't care. I'm fine with it. But like, if that stuff does bother you, then the newer edition is the one to go with. Because it's, again, based off of like the Keep on the Borderlands. Like, it's inspired heavily by it. It's basically our version of that. And so, anyway, I've rambled on and talked about nothing. It feels like I feel like I haven't done this game justice, but I really, really love this game. My players really, really love this game. So, taking politics out of TTRPG systems and TTRPG companies and just simply judging a game based on its merits, I find this more fun to run than 5e. There's not a whole lot of math involved. There is math involved. I'm not saying there's not, but there's not a whole lot of math involved. Um, there's not a lot of number crunching. There's none of that challenge rating stuff. Like, for example, okay, so you have hit die, and you have number attacks, and this works out great because this will show the difference. So, like, that this is probably going to be more suited to your level 1 party. If you wish to tailor your game at a level appropriate approach, you can do that instead of the random rolling of the die and you know having a monster that might be above their level. So if you wanted to do that, to run it more like how people run their more modern games, you can. One hit die, one attack. I'll tell you right now, it's not the hit die you're going to be paying a lot of attention to, but the number of attacks. Because, okay, so this one right here, the Hydra, 5 hit die, 5 to 12 hit die. It scales with like difficulty 16 to 23, because there's going to be different Hydras, and like it depends at like what a fully grown one is and all that. And number of attacks 5 to 12. So, like, again, you can tailor make that to your party, or if you're like me and like to do random encounters, this fella right here could pop up in the game somewhere. And there's plenty of more books and PDFs available. You can, of course, order these to print. Like Mr. Gonnerman has said plenty of times, don't buy this book. Well, not yet anyway. Basic fantasy role playing game rules are available for free on our website, basicfantasy.org. There you will also find adventures like Morgansfort, and that the newer one, especially, like, for whatever reason that bothered you. Alternate rules, which this does have alternate rules in the back for like poison and stuff, because this can be a deadly game if you want to run it like the old school way. But there are ways to make it tailor-made to more modern players and make it a little easier. It depends at your play style, what you feel like running, right, and what your players feel like playing. And other supplementary materials to enhance your game. stuff like additional classes. Like, for example, druids are a thing in this game. So if you had a player that wanted to play as a druid, the druid supplement is available on the website for free to learn how to. Comes with the spells and everything. It's very similar to the cleric. In fact, it's not much different. But anyway, continuing on. But if you don't want to print the rules out yourself, which you could certainly do with the edition with the PDFs, please do buy this book and enjoy. And I have, because I'm kind of a snob and I like to have hard copies. But I guess at the end of the day, like the TLDR version, um, thank you, Chris Gonnerman, for an excellent game. It's been very fun to run, and my players have very much enjoyed it. And so, none of the politics involved with the OSR or with modern TTRPGs, with none of that attached to it, this game stands on its own. It's great for introducing kids to the games. It's great for adults as well, especially old schoolers. Like, okay, here's a testimony. Here's a testimony that Chris Gonnerman can take with him. All right, so uh, the video chat group I play with, we're all Christian men, family men. You might think that that's not important, but it is. So I'll get to my point. So we're all Christian men, right? And so one of the players in our group, he grew up in a very staunchly hardline Catholic family. And so whenever he grew up and became a more chilled out Catholic and then eventually Presbyterian, but that's his personal thing. So, but anyway, whenever he grew up and he didn't have that hardline stuff anymore, um, he chilled out and like he was curious about it because in his household, Dungeons and Dragons and anything that was similar to it was not allowed. So if this game was around back then, it wouldn't be allowed in his household. So this was his opportunity. This was the first game he ever played of a TTRPG. And so he realized this isn't the devil worshipping craziness that his parents thought it was. And so, Chris Gonnerman, your game has given a group of Christian family men, where one of them, who grew up in a very restrictive household, finally had his first experience with playing TTRPGs. So, thank you. Take care. God bless, guys.